Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 282, Thursday, December the 14th, 2017. Wow, 10 days until Christmas Eve. We're almost there, folks. We're going to get there. Alrighty, a lot to talk about today, isn't there? Well, let's start with the Alabama Senate race. I guess we have to congratulate Twitch McConnell, the Republican National Committee, and their friends on the big victory by the Doug Jones, the Soros-funded candidate, who's now the new senator from Alabama. Let's go through the pros and cons, but before we do, I just want to go down through here and prove to you that essentially what Twitch McConnell and the Republican National Committee did in Alabama was they elected Senator George Soros, because Doug Jones is a puppet of George Soros. Let's review the evidence. Doug Jones headed a Soros-funded project to transform federal prosecutors into social justice warriors. Soros contributed $8 million between 2008 and 2010 to this project. And I've read all about it. It's ugly, folks. Doug Jones worked for the Soros-funded Brennan Center to push for felon voting rights. Doug Jones worked with and is tied to other Soros-backed organizations, including the Alliance for Justice, the ACLU, Black Youth Vote, NAACP, and scores of others. Jones endorses Acorn and pushes their agenda, which is another radical left-wing organization backed by Soros. Jones' website calls for people to sign up as activists for Seeking Justice Today, which is another Soros-funded group. Doug Jones' site recommends 6 other groups funded by the Soros Open Society Foundation. So there you have it, and I could go on. You can see that Doug Jones is bought and paid for by George Soros, which is why from this day forward, the new senator from Alabama will be known here on TowerGate as Senator George Soros from Alabama. Senator George Soros from Alabama. That's right, you folks in Alabama. Your new senator is George Soros. It's basically what you got. Now let's look at the pros and cons of this event and talk about some of the things other people are talking about so I can debunk some of this. First of all, you have all these people now talking, particularly on the left, even some on the right, saying, uh-oh, this tells us what may happen in 2018. This could be a precursor to a 2018 event where the Democrats take back control of the Congress, or at least ways the House. Wrong. First of all, this was one race which the Democrats poured everything they had into it. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. Outspent Roy Moore by 5, 6, 7 to 1, especially in the last 24, 48 hours. We know that nearly $6 million was funneled in from the Hollywood leftists. In 2018, the Democrats will be trying to defend more than 24 Senate seats and close to 200 House seats. They will not have the money to invest in all of those races the way they did in this one race. And we already have talked about the trouble the Democrats are having raising money in the first place. They're simply not going to be able to launch this type of massive avalanche of cash flow and resources into all those races into 2018 the way they did in this one race in Alabama. It should also be noted that Roy Moore was not particularly a good candidate. I was hoping to hold on to the seat for the Republicans, but I was no fan of Roy Moore, and he's not a good candidate. He's got a lot of problems. I didn't like Luther Strange either. That little deal between him and the governor didn't smell very good. And that's why he was defeated so badly by Roy Moore. But the fact of the matter is, with all the allegations against him, whether they're true or false, and the fact that he's only appeals to a real hardcore group of religious conservatives in Alabama, the road was just too tough to hoe. We should also look at the margin of victory, considering all the resources and the weak candidate that Moore was. The Senator George Soros from Alabama only won by 1.5%. Wasn't a big victory by any stretch in terms of the gap. It's a pretty close race. And of course, we know that Twitch McConnell, the Republican National Committee, and of course Karl Rove, doing his work for the Bushes, did everything they could to cut the man's legs out from under him. He had everything going against him, and he still only lost by 1.5 points. It should also be noted that this was not a typical Senate race, where the senator is running for a 6-year term. This race was to fill the vacancy left by Jeff Sessions, to finish his term, which is only 2 years. So this race was really just for a 2-year Senate seat, not a typical 6-year seat. In other words, in 2 years, the Senator George Soros from Alabama will have to run again, and I suspect he will lose, because I can't imagine Alabama, the voters there, allowing that to happen to them again. There won't be a Roy Moore running next time, I can assure you that. And hopefully not Luther Strange. There are better candidates, better conservative candidates, and I don't care. It needs to be a conservative, libertarian, a nationalist, a populist, whatever. Anyone who's at the very least, center-right, who supports the Trump agenda. And I think that that's what we'll be getting in the election coming up in 2 years to try to win that seat back, which we should be able to do. It should also be noted that Roy Moore would have been a freak show, because to me, when I watch Roy Moore, he looks a lot more like a Southern Baptist preacher giving a sermon than he does a politician. And had he spent more time politicking and talking about policy and things and such, and less time preaching, he might have done better. He might have even won. He spent too much time preaching up on his moral high horse. I don't like politicians trying to go out there and tell me I should vote for them because of their great moralism. I could give a flying shit about their moralism for the most part. What I care about is how they're going to vote, what they're going to vote for, what their policy positions are. I already accept that most of those people in D.C. have the morals of an alley cat. I don't expect much from that. And what if the Senator George Soros from Alabama has the highest morals ever? He's still going to be opposing the Trump agenda, isn't he? So which would you rather have? A moral absolutist who's wrong on policy, or someone with the morals of an alley cat who's right on policy? Might be a tough question for some of you, but it's not for me. So anyway, yes, I did want to hold that seat, but the fact is, it could have been a lot worse than it was. And a lot of these things that you're hearing today in the mainstream media, that this is somehow a precursor of what's to come in 2018, by no means is that true. Nor was this a referendum on Trump or his policies. Not at all. Those people in Alabama know that Trump didn't support Roy Moore originally. He supported Luther Strange, which, because I guess he thought he was the best guy or could win. But there were some other people in the early primary there in Alabama who had their legs taken out from under them by the Republican National Committee and Twitch McConnell. Some real good guys got taken down before this thing ever started. So this entire Alabama Senate race was rigged by Twitch McConnell, the Republican National Committee, sabotaging themselves and their own candidate. And of course, an influx of massive amounts of money coming from outside of Alabama, along with a lot of allegations of improper behavior by Roy Moore 40 years ago. None of it actually proven, but enough of it was thrown against the wall that some of it stuck, and it did have some effect. Because ultimately what cost Roy Moore that race was he didn't get the turnout. Too many people just looked back and said, you know, I'm sick of it. This whole thing is just sickening. I'm just not going to vote. Let the chips fall where they may, and we'll try again in 2 years, because I don't like either of these guys. So the race was spoiled. But I hope the voters of Alabama and other states around the country have learned their lesson and understand now exactly how ruthless Twitch McConnell, the Republican National Committee, and the Republican neocons and their friends, how ruthless they are. They absolutely would rather lose a Senate seat to a Democrat than see a pro-Trump agenda type person win. That's the message that we should all take from this. That's the lesson that should be learned. So you have a new senator there in Alabama, George Soros, the new senator from Alabama, who was paying the Russian lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya. Who was paying her? Veselnitskaya got her start in Russia after graduating from the Moscow State Legal Academy. She then went to work in the prosecutor's office in Oblast, Russia. Then she went into private practice into real estate law. She became the personal lawyer to Vladimir Solovyov, who was the vice president of Russia's state-owned railways and the former minister of transportation, until he sued her. She represented the Russian Federal Security Services from 2005 to 2013. She worked for Russian prosecutor's office and other private clients since 2013, including Fusion GPS. So, she was a busy little lawyer, wasn't she? Working both for the Russian government, working for wealthy Russian private individuals who also held at one time either current or former government officials of Russia. She was obviously very active in the United States, working for Fusion GPS on 2 or 3 different occasions, and probably others. She speaks some English, but obviously she doesn't speak it fluently because she always has a translator whenever she's in any type of a meeting or anything like that. We know that she was probably here, from what we've learned, she was obviously here to work on the Magnitsky Act, which obviously that would be working for some agency of the Russian government, because it's the Russian government that wanted to get the Magnitsky Act overturned, or at least ways get Mr. Magnitsky's name taken off the law, at the very least. She was unsuccessful at both. So, we know that she was probably getting paid by the Russian, some agency of the Russian government regarding the Magnitsky stuff, which is why she claimed to be here. And that's what she wanted to talk about when she met with Trump Jr. and Manafort and Kirshner in the Trump Tower. Now, she was working with Fusion GPS on that, but I doubt that Fusion GPS was paying her. I think both Fusion GPS and Veselnitskaya were both working for some agency of the Russian government on the Magnitsky Act. But there's much more to look at here, because as we learned back, I guess what, August, September, probably before September, probably August, we learned that Veselnitskaya did not have the proper visa to get into the country. But she was given some special privilege and given special access to enter the country. And that, we understand, was given to her by Preet Bharara, the New York attorney, who we believe was ordered to do so by the U.S. Justice Department, and that would be Loretta Lynch. So the question you have to ask when you're asking who the FBI may have been paying, such as Fusion GPS, Christopher Steele, people like that, you have to wonder, because she was allowed to get the special privilege which came from the Obama administration. You have to wonder, based on the activities she's been involved in, was she being paid by the FBI along with Fusion GPS? It's a question I don't know that anybody has looked into, but I think that as we dig deeper into this, we are going to find, and remember, she was just in Congress about a week and a half ago for hearings, and we learned after her testimony that most of the members who were at that hearing stated that they did not believe her answers were very forthcoming. And she, of course, directly challenges Glenn Simpson's account that they met on the day that she was at the Trump Tower meeting. She says that did not happen. Glenn Simpson says he met her twice that day. So she obviously, one of them is lying, and it's probably her, because Glenn Simpson really had no reason to lie about that. It didn't help his case any, and he was under oath. We're not really sure about Veselnitskaya, but I think that she is not totally out of this picture, and she has too many connections to too many other people, including Senator Magoo and others. And the circles that she runs in are probably the same circles that David Kramer runs in, who's McCain's right-hand man. I believe we're going to find Veselnitskaya was more involved than we're being led to believe, and that possibly she was here arguing on the Magnitsky Act, but that may have been a cover for something else that she was also working on. Be interesting to know if we find out, when we find out where the money went. Be interesting if we find out when Devin Nunes successfully gets those bank records, or Mr. Gubarev's attorneys get those bank records, and we find out who Fusion GPS was paying. Be interesting if we find out whether or not Veselnitskaya was one of the people getting paid, and then that will beg the question, what was she getting paid for? We'll keep her pretty close to our study of this situation, not let her get too far out of the peripheral, because I'm telling you, she has some other role to play in all this as well, regarding the dossier and the setup and the whole 9 yards. Let's review some of the Glenn Simpson deposition to find some very interesting things about Bruce Orr and his wife Nellie. Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS confirmed in court filings that he met with Justice Department official Bruce Orr in 2016. Simpson's declaration filed in federal court says that he met at Bruce Orr's request. Simpson and Orr met at Bruce Orr's request, according to Glenn Simpson. That was in the weeks after the presidential election, and we actually know exactly when that was. It was the weekend of Thanksgiving, right after the election. Orr sought the meeting to discuss our findings regarding Russia and the election, according to Simpson. Simpson also stated that he did not hire, stated that he did hire Orr's wife, Nellie, to serve as a subcontractor on Trump-related work. Nellie, referred to as the former government official, an expert in Russian matters, was hired to help the company with its research and analysis of Mr. Trump. This is directly from the court filings from Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS. The government agency Simpson is talking about that she worked for was the Open Source Works. That is the CIA's in-house open source research department. She was working for the CIA. Nellie Orr is CIA. The Orrs and Simpson worked together before when they served on the Justice Department Expert Working Group report on international and organized crime. That's going back almost 10 years. So the Orrs and Simpson have known each other for quite some time. I suspect that GPS Fusion has some intelligence ties if they're not a straight-up CIA front operation. We know that Simpson and his partner both have close ties to the intelligence community. He essentially has a CIA person working inside Fusion GPS. Bruce Orr's wife. Let's take a look at a couple words here that need to be threshed out a little bit, that need to be questioned. When Simpson says that Orr sought the meeting to discuss our findings regarding Russia and the election, who is our? Who's our? Does he mean they're getting together to discuss Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele's findings? Or is he talking about getting together with Bruce Orr to discuss their findings that were happening between Bruce Orr and Simpson? Is our Simpson and Steele, or is our Bruce Orr and Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS? Who's our? That needs to be explained, because it's not totally clear, is it? Who our is. Bruce Orr sought the meeting to discuss our findings regarding Russia and the election. It sounds like he's talking about him and Bruce Orr. Orr called me to discuss our findings. The way he words that, he didn't say Bruce Orr contacted me to find out about Fusion GPS and Steele or whatever, our as an hour. He's mentioning Bruce Orr in the same sentence and then using the term our. It's a little thing, but it needs to be looked at, and he needs to be asked about that. And I'm sure when they get Bruce Orr in there, they are going to ask him about the depth of his relationship with Glenn Simpson and the depth of his involvement in the dossier, and that question should be answered. Another word comes up here where he says Nellie, who was referred to as the former government official, the expert in Russian matters, was hired to help the company with its research. She worked for the CIA's research division. She was brought into Fusion GPS to do research, and then Glenn Simpson says she was hired to help the company with its research. Well, we all know that the CIA is often referred to as the company. So when he says company, does Glenn Simpson mean the company as in CIA? Or does he mean company as in Fusion GPS? Or are they one and the same? We need to dig that one up, don't we? Words mean things. Words mean things. Well, of course, we had Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein today. And of course, he says, when he was asked, he says he believes he does know whether or not the FBI paid for the dossier, but he won't talk about it. He seemed to suggest that's a matter for the Senate Intelligence Committee, although he was corrected and told, no, we actually have oversight over you, and you can tell us that. But he still refused. So we're watching basically what we saw today with Rosenstein. If any of you watched any of the video clips, which I did, I watched the Jim Jordan clip, I watched DeSantis clip, I watched Trey Gowdy's clip, I watched the head of the committee, Goodlatte, I watched his clip, I watched 2 or 3 other clips. I watched about 7 or 8 clips today, probably not the entire thing, but most of it. And it's funny that a lot of the very exact same questions that were asked to Rosenstein were asked to Chris Wray, and a lot of the exact same responses were given by Rosenstein as were given by Wray, which is basically this. Well, we got the IG, the Inspector General, working on it, and we're waiting for his report. And of course the question back to them was, hey, haven't you seen enough? And then of course they'll run through all the evidence. You know, they talk about Peter Ben Strokinus, they talk about Bruce Orr and his wife, they talk about Fusion GPS, they talk about all these things, and but still Rosenstein acted pretty much just like Wray. Of course, cock-blocked them at every turn. Just simply doesn't want to cooperate or answer questions. So what is the game here? What is the game? Let me tell you what the game is. Rosenstein, Wray, Mueller, McCabe, Comey, the whole bunch, along with their Democratic friends in the deep state, Michael Morrell and company, what they're all hoping for and praying for and counting on is the 2018 elections, that the Democrats will take back the House, which will put them in control of all those committees, and they can make all these questions and investigations go away. That's what they're banking on. They're playing a game of beat the clock. The clock is ticking, and what they want to try to do is to see if they can filibuster and cockblock and refuse to give answers, to refuse to provide documents, to drag this thing out, to try to kill the clock until 2018, hoping they can drag it out that long. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think they can drag it out that long. I don't even think they're going to win the 2018 elections. Yes, they will probably pick up some seats. The party out of power usually does. But I don't think that they're going to take back the Congress unless the Republicans just go completely stupid and don't accomplish anything. But this is what they're counting on. They're playing beat the clock. They're hoping the clock runs out on them, and once the clock runs out, they're hoping that's the clock running out, meaning the 2018 elections, at which point Democrats take over and they can put an end to all these questions. I don't think it's going to work out. And I think we're going to get to the bottom of this long before that. There's too many people applying too many pressures on too many pressure points. You have the 2 lawsuits that are ongoing with Mr. Gubarev versus BuzzFeed and Christopher Steele. Those are civil cases, which the Congress and the deep state can't control very well. And they're moving forward. We have 4 different committees: the House Oversight Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the Joint Committee that are all pressing on all these issues. Devin Nunes has now gotten to the point where he has we found out yesterday that tomorrow, Thursday, he's going to send his investigators over to physically get the documents that he wants. They haven't been sending them over. He's going to go get them. And I guess he's saying, stop me. I assume that they'll be there with some armed security people as well. If they have to take him at gunpoint, they probably will. Devin Nunes is going to get his hands on those documents. They will not be able to run this thing out until the midterm elections of 2018. We're going to get to the bottom of a lot of this long before then. So that's how I think that is going to play out. I don't think they're going to be successful on either of those fronts. I don't think that they're going to take over the House in 2018, and I don't think that they can run the clock out that long. This thing's moving too quickly. There are too many people pressing on too many pressure points, and too many guys who want to get to the bottom of this. Just too many people. So I don't think that the plan is going to work. And we still have the thing that may break every bit of this wide open, is this confidential informant who's going to testify regarding Uranium One. That individual is going to be testifying here soon, and I think that's going to blow this thing wide open. It doesn't really touch on the dossier and all this other stuff, but it does go right to the heart and soul of the corruption at the Justice Department, the FBI, and beyond. There's still many other witnesses left to interview. There's still many journalists working hard and digging on these stories. We still have whistleblowers now coming out. We had 3 come out last week alone. There'll be more. No way they can run the clock out on this until 2018. Keep the faith. We are winning, and we are making progress on this particular issue. The dossier. We're going to get to the bottom of the dossier, believe me. PBS has now suspended indefinitely Tavis Smiley for sexual misconduct. Boy, I'll tell you, this sexual stuff, it's hitting the Democrats hard, isn't it? They seem to be the ones, 95% of the people that are being taken down in all these sex cases and sex allegations are Democrats. And they're all Democrats over there at PBS. I can assure you of that. Good news on the tax reform bill. One of the most difficult things to do is to get a tax reform or any bill through the committee process, where once it passes the House, then the Senate passes a bill, then they have to get the 2 houses together, get their bills together, and come up with one bill between the 2. That's usually where the breakdowns occur, and a lot of problems happen, and the bills get ripped apart and changed, and a lot of things go bad there. But that's not the case. They very quickly got together, put together the bill, and it is through. So it's very likely that we are going to see a vote on the tax reform and tax cut bill before the end of the year, which means that the George Soros, the new senator, George Soros from Alabama, his vote will not count at this point because Luther Strange will still be voting, and he will be supporting it, of course. So that means that the election in Alabama will not have any effect whatsoever on the vote on this tax bill. And that should happen here before Christmas, I would think, certainly before the end of the year, because it's moving ahead and looking good. We now have the text messages from Peter Benstrokinus. They are going through them as we speak. I've read through some of them. I'm sure many of you have as well. Tomorrow we'll be specifically looking at some of those text messages, and there are many more to come. There was over 2,000. They've released 250. That's 10%. Just with what we've seen so far, the evidence is very damning for Peter Benstrokinus. The Clinton body count may have gone up by 1 more member. Dr. Dean Lorich was found dead on his bathroom floor with a knife sticking out of his chest. He is the doctor who blew the whistle on the Clinton Foundation in Haiti. And he didn't just write 1 letter or make 1 phone call. This guy was adamant. He wrote many letters. He went to Washington. He talked to many members of Congress. This guy probably worked harder than anybody to try to expose the corruption and what was happening in Haiti. So he's been found dead with a knife in his chest. 1 more member added to the Clinton body count. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's TowerGate, day 282. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll take a look at some of those text messages from Peter Benstrokinus. How about that? Thank you so much for tuning in. Good night.